Every person has a beginning, middle, and end to their story. However, most never really get a chance to record it for future generations to see it. This is a story about a man and how his ancestors arrived to Oklahoma.
I go by Jim Knight. My name is James Edward Knight. I'm named sorta for an uncle of mine that passed a long time ago. His name was James David, and my son is named after him, James David. I never knew Uncle Dave. He had cancer and passed by his own hand. I'm 82 years old, of course, widower. Lost my wife a year ago, March 30th. Have 4 kids, one who lives right across the street from where we're at right now. But oldest one is Shannon. She was born in Fort Hood, Texas in 1968. Jimmy was born 1971 at Fort Raleigh, Kansas. And then Amy and Jennifer were born in the 80s at St. Francis Hospital. I played basketball and baseball in high school. Loved baseball, always have. I was a military policeman. Captain was my rank. I was in the military. I was stationed at Fort Raleigh, Kansas, as a matter of fact. That was in 1972. The Army made a military policeman out of it. And when I got out, I went into security and retired in 2001. And it's been great ever since. I love retirement.
Even though the passing of Mary Sherry has made Jim a lot more lonelier in recent years, but he does have several other things that keep him going, such as friends, relatives, and most importantly, a small cat population.
Get close so they're waiting. All right, guys, let's go. Come on. Time to eat. Amy, our middle daughter, was a vet tech before she retired. And she had some cats that, I think there was 4, that she rescued, or they did anyway. Sherry and I didn't have any cats. So Amy brought them out here. She lived, her and her husband lived in town, didn't have any place to keep them, and they didn't want to put them down. So we just said, bring them out. So they brought the 4 out, and then Amy wound up bringing us 4 more, one at a time. So we had 8 feral cats. Basically, they were feral. We just left them out here and fed them and gave them a place to stay. Sherry fell and broke her hip, wound up in the hospital. She was in the hospital for 4 months, and she finally got out of the hospital and came home. And instead of 8 cats, we had 56, because our other kids, Jennifer, Jim D, and Amy, came out here because I stayed at the hospital. I never left anyway, but they came out here and they fed the cats, took care of them and all that stuff, and wound up, when Sherry and I came home, we had 56 cats. I started feeding them. I have a pretty good sized food bill for my animals. I'm down to about 36 now, and they pretty much hang around here. They're all fat and happy.
It's just a little cat paradise.
Yeah, it's a little cat paradise, yeah. Well, they stay. I mean, most of them anyway. I was kind of neutral, but they grow on you. That's why I have so many cats and 1 dog.
Where were you born?
I was born in Chickasha, Oklahoma. I've forgotten the name of the hospital. It was just Chickasha Hospital. Mom and Dad moved there in 1935, I believe it was. 34 or 35, they moved to Chickasha. Dad was born in Shawnee, Oklahoma. I don't know why they were in Shawnee when Dad was born. That was in 1904. But he grew up in Welling, over on the other side of Tahlequah, out on the edge of the Cookson Hills over there. And Grandpa was a farmer. My grandfather, Zeb Franklin Knight. People try to make it Zebediah, but it wasn't. His name was Zeb. That's on his birth certificate, Zeb Franklin Knight. My dad was a police officer in Chickasha from 1941 to 1945, I believe. The reason they wound up in Chickasha, Dad worked for a grocery chain. I don't remember the name of it. But Dad worked for a grocery chain, and they transferred him to Chickasha, and they liked it there, and he wouldn't leave. They just stayed, and that's where they are now. All the property's gone now. Stayed there until I was 20 years old, and then I joined the Army. I went to the University of Oklahoma. Vietnam started, and I decided that I didn't particularly care to go to college anymore, so I dropped out and joined the Army. I was an enlisted man for about a year and a half, and then I went to OCS. Transferred back to the Military Police Corps. I was an artillery officer, Fort Sill. From there to Fort Hood, Texas. That's where Sherry and I lived when we first got married. That's where Shannon was born. We were there 21 months, and I got transferred to Vietnam. And then when I came home, I went to an advanced military police officer school at Fort Gordon, Georgia, and the Army picked me out to go back to college. So they sent me back to college at Nebraska for a year to get my degree in law enforcement, and went from there to Fort Riley, Kansas, and from there to Savannah Army Depot up in Illinois. It was one of 3 nuclear weapons storage sites in the United States. And I was the MP company commander there, and resigned, got out of the Army, came home, and since my brother lived in Tulsa, we moved to Tulsa.
Never grew it down to your butt or anything, huh?
I never had long hair.
Never.
Longest hair I ever had was about as long as your hair.
Yeah. Tell us about your ancestors' journey to Oklahoma.
I'm not sure what state they were in. For some reason, I keep thinking it was Georgia. It was either Georgia or South Carolina. I'm not sure. But they left that state. My grandfather, Zed, had 4 brothers, and 5 of them left their home state ahead of the sheriff's posse. I have no idea why. Nobody would ever tell me. I asked everybody that I could think of, and nobody ever told me why. But they left and they went to Texas. They rode to Texas, and 4 of them became cowboys. One of them became a wrangler, and if you called him a cowboy, he would knock you down. And so all 5 of them worked for a big ranch down in Texas. I don't know what the name of it was back then. I don't remember.
Before census.
It probably, if that was the name of it back then, but it was the biggest ranch around back in those days. And this was in the 1800s, of course, after the Civil War. They drove cattle up the Chisholm Trail and through Oklahoma for the ranch, and they all 5 fell in love with Oklahoma. So they talked it over and decided that they wanted to live in Oklahoma. They didn't want to be cowboys forever.
Or Texans.
Or Texans, yeah, that was probably most of it. They didn't want to be Texans. But I can't say much about Texas because my mother was from Texas.
That's right.
I have to be nice about Texas once in a while, except on game day. But anyway, the 5 of them rode their horses to Oklahoma. And they all settled over around Tahlequah. I have no idea why they wanted to live in that part of Oklahoma because there weren't any cattle trails through there. I have to assume that when they left the trail towns in Kansas going back to the ranch that they traveled through that part of Oklahoma. And of course that's mountainous country over there. It's beautiful territory. So they all wound up over either in Welling or Tahlequah. And Grandpa Knight, after he got settled here in Oklahoma, he sent back to their home state and asked a lady, young woman named Nora, oh my, I've forgotten her last name.
Sisson.
What was it?
Sisson.
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 Sisson. Nora Sisson. He bought her a train ticket to come to Oklahoma. And she came, and they got married when she got here. And that's how our family started in Oklahoma. My dad was the oldest. His name was George. He had 3 brothers, 3 sisters. And Dad went to work for some grocery company, some grocery chain, and they left wherever they got transferred to, and they wound up in Chickasha. But the family came to Oklahoma by that route. They came from Georgia, where I think they were, to Texas to Oklahoma.
I loved seeing my uncle tell stories. I have grown up listening to the stories at my grandparents' house, which would be his mom and dad. We're a storytelling family, and I've always been interested in the history. But to see my uncle sitting there getting up there in age and knowing he doesn't have a whole lot of time left was especially powerful to me, to hear about how our family, or at least part of it, came to be in Oklahoma, and my grandparents' love story, which was especially wonderful. It just takes me back to when I was little and grew up around all this love and family and a sense of belonging to something truly powerful and special. It was a wonderful experience.
To hear stories about your family. I think every family probably has a set of stories that are told. They don't always, they're just kind of, a lot of times they're not super accurate, as I've kind of found with the the advent of 23andMe and DNA testing and people doing the Ancestry.com. And, you start kind of learning who you're actually related to and what stories were kind of made up over the time and other ones that were accurate. So I think anytime you got the opportunity to sit down with an elder in the family, such as Jim, you wouldn't get to hear if they weren't told before they pass, and then they just kind of get lost in time. And Jim's a great storyteller, and he kind of got off the beaten path a little bit, which was fun to hear because he would just kind of talk about fun stories, and they were kind of coming to him as he went. So it was just really interesting to sit there and get to hear some of those stories and kind of solidify some of what's lore and what was real in your lineage. So yeah.